Hi, I'm Niklas Hallin and this is the Neckbolt vlog. Today we're gonna keep talking about character design and we'll discuss something that I have come to think of as the mammal bias. What I mean when I say mammal bias is that we as humans naturally feel a kinship with other fluffy mammals, whereas other species such as fish and reptiles and robots and insects, they come across as distant and alien and lacking in an inner emotional life. To show you what I mean, I'll talk a bit about Ratchet and Clank, and specifically about Ratchet, who looks like this. Yahtzee described him as highly marketable, and yeah, I guess that's a polite way of saying it. But did you know that in the early stages of development, Ratchet looked much more like a kind of lizard? It's true, and it seems hard to believe how one would go from this to this. Now, I don't know exactly how it happened, of course. I am merely speculating here. But the story that plays out in my head goes as follows. They started off with the lizard version because they wanted to do something weird, something new, something you don't see very often. There aren't really that many beloved reptile characters around, and the Insomniac artists wanted to challenge that status quo. Perhaps they wanted to rebel against that icon of old school traditionalism and 1950s family values that is Mickey Mouse. But then they started drawing and iterating on the character and trying out different ideas and showing them to producers and the marketing department and other stakeholders. Now, if the stakeholder would have flat out said, "We can't make a cold-blooded lizard with a stiff face," no one is going to be able to relate to that. And then the artist would have perked up and proudly declared, "That's the whole point. I can totally make an audience connect with this character, even if it doesn't have an internal body heat, a cute nose, and colorful irises." This, by the way, is absolutely and completely doable. But that's not how it went. They made 2 sketches and someone said, I kinda like this one more, it seems warmer and friendlier, you know? And then they went with that. And then they made 2 new versions of that, and someone said, version B is better because we're going to be able to animate a wider range of facial expression with that face. And so on and so on, and so the character evolved in a very Darwinian sense into this inoffensive theme park mascot with warm fur, big ears, a cute nose, and nice expressive eyes. It's not a cat, it's not a fox, it's not a bear, but it is most definitely a mammal. This whole character is basically just all the traits we associate with mammals, all thrown together into one large pile. But it is incredibly unspecified. Remember last episode when I talked about substance? Well, this is what happens when you lose your grip and the character's substance becomes bland and non-specific. It's to the point where the founder and CEO of Insomniac Games literally refers to Ratchet as this long-haired thing.
He started off as a lizard and then went through several other variations and eventually became this long-eared thing.
And to me that is it's unacceptable.
Speaking of which, look at this little guy. He's a mad dictatorial lemon person, which, I mean, it's a bit weird, but it is clearly something. His substance is well defined. He's not an thing. And also, by the way, he's not really a mammal. But that's okay because he's a villain, right? Well, another great example of the mammal bias in action is that in the books, Lord Voldemort's eyes are described as bright red. But in the movies, they had to make them this pale blue color instead. They simply couldn't give Voldemort red eyes when he was adopted into a visual medium because we in the audience, we wouldn't have been able to look at his face and see what he was up to. Heck, we would hardly have been able to tell which direction he was looking, and without that, no actor or director could have made him sufficiently scary. Or could they? But here I am going on and on about the so-called mammal bias, and yet my own game has the most adorable elephant ever. And that's true. Indeed, everyone who looks at this immediately feels strongly for the elephant, and they are instantly charmed. It almost feels like I'm cheating a bit. But I want to point out that besides the elephant, there are several kinds of people in this world. There are humans, sure, but there are also zombies and robots. 2 out of 3 fantasy races in my game are creatures that are traditionally seen as cold, soulless, and probably not even alive in any real sense of the word. And my quest is to give these characters a rich and blooming culture and present individuals you can root for and feel sorry for and care about. Now only time will tell how well I actually succeed in this. And with that, it's time for this week's Wednesday's report. So I've spent pretty much all of last week creating the first boss for the game at the very end of the crypt dungeon. I am sorely tempted to add cheap post-processing effects to make it look a bit like an old school horror movie, but I don't know. And that's all for today's episode, but stay tuned for next week when we'll keep talking about character design and take a little peek at Overwatch. This whole project funded via Patreon. If you want to help out, super cool if you could head over there and subscribe. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on Twitter for quick updates. Thank you, and I will see you next time.